Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Online marketing or e-commerce is fast becoming a new way of life with a growing number of Nigerians and even beyond. And who would not be attracted to the obvious advantages? The singular fact that many physically exerting steps are eliminated in the process of demand and supply has made online marketing simply irresistible to a huge share of the market. For a look at all of this, we're now being joined here by Juliet Anammah, the Chief Executive of Jumia, which in many ways is a premier brand in online marketing in Nigeria and Africa. Welcome to the program. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I want to start with your comments at the Nigerian Economic Summit. I mean, when you were a little girl, I'm sure your ambition or your dream was not that one day you'll be CEO of Jumia, because that simply did not exist at that time. So how are we preparing Nigeria for jobs and businesses of the future? I liked your contribution. You said that a means of providing infrastructure is to give the youths internet-enabled telephones, and they can do a lot with that. Can you expand on that? Because that's a different approach from like cash handouts and the usual understanding of the term infrastructure. We tend to think of roads and bridges and what have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think one of the main things I was talking about there is the fact that when it comes to, because we're looking at it from the perspective of population growth and how that was going to explode by 2050, what is projected to be Nigeria's growth rate and what we do with the young people. So what we looked at was the fact that, or rather what I was highlighting is the fact that yes, there are many things we can do. Education was one of them, and then coming to infrastructure, which you just highlighted. Infrastructure is very important, but we typically think about it from the perspective of roads, rail, and so on. But in this day and age, you find that just the access to internet, access to a tool that allows you to connect with people, to be able to transact with people, is also some form of infrastructure. And that's why I related a smartphone as a form of infrastructure. And therefore, whatever policies and means that can make such a tool accessible to more hands, then more hands, of course, being more in the hands of the youth and other people, then you are actually facilitating some means of micro, I would say, catalyzing the economy at very micro levels. Because the more I can interact with you, the more I can connect with you, and I have access to a tool that I can do that, you're creating a platform for that to happen. Now, it doesn't mean we still don't have to fix the roads and the rails. Of course, those are very important. But the word I like to borrow from another source I call this digital rails. So this is some kind of a digital rail also, though it's not a physical type of infrastructure. Yeah.
Okay, and what has the business been like since the listing on the New York Stock Exchange? I mean, there were controversial views. Some people felt that services had gone down, some people felt that services had gone up. But inside the actual company itself, was there any sort of shift in terms of business when you got listed on the NYSE, or things just kept on as usual?
Things kept on as usual. I mean, listing is simply an event.
Yeah.
It's simply a capital raising event to that extent. It has nothing to do with the systems or the processes or the strategy of the business has always been the same, and it hasn't changed. We're still very much focused on customer adoption, increasing the number of people who have access to Jumia, who transact on Jumia. Even now, we're looking at people who actually come to Jumia, they use Jumia, even though they don't transact, they don't actually buy a product or service. To us, we call them users. So they're like, we look at our daily active users, our monthly active users. Why is that important to us? Because it's important to us, it tells us that people come, they consume content. Maybe they don't have the cash today to buy something, but they will in the future. But it's important that they see us as a relevant platform where they can come and check things, browse things, consume content in some form or the other. So business, it just continues. There's nothing else I can say there.
So Jumia was the first African company to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange, but was dealt with quite a blow shortly after with this report that with allegations of falsifications of numbers and what have you. The shares took a hit, but it's been reported that the shares have recovered. What was that experience like for you as a CEO? How have you been surmounting those challenges? And what informed the decision to list on the New York Stock Exchange and not an African one?
I think we've that point about the choice about location of listing, I think we've dealt with it before, even on our Rise News. So if you permit me, I really wouldn't want to go back to it. I think we've talked about how we got to the fact that, look, this is all, it's an African brand. We want to make sure that an African brand, and we are actually very proud of the fact that because we're an African brand that's been listed, we've created opportunity for others to follow in that same path, that others see that as aspirational and something they need. And that for us is something that we're quite proud of. Now, yes, of course, there are many things that happen in the life cycle of a company, and what's important to us is the fact that we continue to concentrate on our strategy, concentrate on objectives and the promise we've made to our shareholders, our stakeholders, customers, vendors. What we want to do is every year we're constantly improving on how we build a platform that gives our consumers the best user experience, gives our sellers the best user experience. We want to make sure that we continue increasing the rate at which people adopt e-commerce. People use online digital payment, our Jumia Pay platform is an example of one which we've built, and contribute to the economy. For us, that's important. And as long as we continue on those core objectives, once in a while, we're going to have one thing or the other. We'll have to deal with it. We move on. We take corrections, or we take actions. We keep improving and keep moving forward. For us, that's the most important thing.
And also in terms of improvements of your technology as well that's used on the systems, how often is that revamped, should we say, or looked at? I'll give an example with Jumia Food, for example, like the maps on Jumia Food. Yeah. Like one would want them to be a bit faster or a bit more efficient, but they're quite slow. So what is that technical aspect like, and what can customers expect from Jumia in terms of advancements of the technology of the platform?
Our entire business and ecosystem, our entire platform is built on technology, that's for sure. And I can tell you, if I look at where we started from, 2012 to where we are now, clearly we're miles ahead in terms of where we used to be before. So it's a continuous cycle. And every year we keep looking at what are the new things. Again, it's back to the objective. We want to build a platform where we give consumers the best user experience. Now, every year, what is best keeps shifting, it keeps changing. So we keep investing in systems, we keep investing in processes. I can tell you right now, there are like hundreds and hundreds of things we would like to do, but of course you can't do all of them. So every year you keep prioritizing to see what are the things that are best, that can drive the most value for consumers, and which ones we then defer to the next year, and we keep improving that way. So it's a continuous cycle. That's just the best answer to that. And we'll have to keep doing that, keep improving year on year.
And back to your earlier points about education, which you were making at that summit, that's where education comes in, doesn't it? We need to continue training and developing, especially with Nigerian developers.
Yeah.
What do you think needs to be done about that from the private sector perspective and also the government perspective? Because obviously the talent is there, the drive is there. We all know that these are the jobs of the future, but what do we need to invest at this point?
Education is so much at the core of our development as an economy. So it's not, if you recall at the NYSE summit, some way or the other, we all dovetailed back to education being the primary thing. And interestingly, last year, I worked on the Industrial Policy Council, which was actually set up by the federal government, and we looked at ways in which we could, I was chairman of the subcommittee that looked at skills transfer. And one of the things we looked at was on digital education. So how do we ensure that we understand what are the skill sets that are required, and there's a means by which those kinds of skill sets are being developed. And we looked at partnerships between companies like Andela that have producing developers, and using government platforms like the Digital Bridge Institute, working together with ITF to see how ITF can provide the funding, Digital Bridge Institute can provide a platform and the location. They actually have a great location in Oshodi, and Andela can provide a curriculum. So those, if you ask me, those kinds of, I would say, public and private sector partnerships are very important. And we even narrowed it down to what are the specific skill sets. If you ask me fundamentally in an economy like ours, with the number of people who we have who are young people, there are 3 core skill sets that we should fundamentally be developing. And those are problem-solving skills, critical reasoning skills, right, and leadership. And when you break down the problem-solving skills, it's really about math skills. It's about computer programming skills, right? You break down critical reasoning, it's about literary skills, ability to communicate. It's about social skills, understanding history and social sciences, economics, and so on. So these are fundamentals that really, if we wanted to take a very drastic approach to developing the people with education and preparing them for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, these are things that we can leverage today, and it's possible. You know, the DBI is there, it's been built. Andela is an existing entity, ITF is an existing entity. So all of these kinds of partnerships and more that we do of them, these are one of the ways I think that we can actually begin to do the right things in education for that digital economy.
Absolutely, because we're moving into the 4th industrial revolution, and one would wonder how governments and parents are preparing their children for that. So it's good to see these projects coming up. But Tundu mentioned something about being the first African company to have listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and further mentioned that we're not listed on any stock exchange at the moment in Africa. Are there any plans to list on the Nigeria Stock Exchange or any other stock exchanges on the continent?
We continue to explore that in the future. For now, I think that the most important thing for us is just concentrating on, like I said, delivering on the mandate. So what mandate have we promised our stakeholders? Our stakeholders, our shareholders, our customers, our vendors. At some point in the future, of course, we would consider multiple at the end of listing is a capital raising decision. So we would, of course, review those. And by the way, Oscar Anammah is a friend of mine, and we're constantly in touch, and we talk all the time.
This is actually what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, well, just before we go to the break, we might not have enough time for you to take the answer, but I'll ask you the question. With regards to e-commerce, the future of e-commerce, what are the impediments in the way of this industry? Because you have giants like Amazon, Alibaba. There's no reason why we have not quite reached that critical mass. What is the issue?
Okay. Do I answer it now or after
well,
the
you
break?
can start. Since we still have a few seconds left.
Okay, so the thing is, first of all, we have to realize we operate in different markets. Right, every market has its own peculiar structure and peculiar challenges.
I'm sorry, Ms. Anammah, it's time for
all right, no problem.
We'll take the rest of your answer when we come back.
No problem.
Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still with Juliet Anammah, the Chief Executive Officer of Jumia. Just before the break, you were telling us what are the challenges, the impediments in e-commerce in Nigeria? And I was comparing Jumia to Amazon and Alibaba that it could reach those heights, but realize that even those two could create impediments. We talk about buy Nigerian, but people tend to think of that in terms of going into physical shops. But people do need to support African e-commerce platforms, don't they?
Certainly, and I'll start with the first part of your question, which is around comparing, where first thing to remember is that they have like at least almost 13 to 15 years ahead, right? So these were the pioneering e-commerce companies in the markets when they started. So they've had quite a long run to get to where they are, and that's also our ambition in Nigeria, that by the time we're getting to where they are today, we will also be much bigger in terms of comparing to where we are today. And we've seen the trajectory, and we just continue on that trajectory. And that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is also to look at the fact that the structure of the markets are also different in many ways. And the one classic example I always give people is when it comes to logistics. In a U.S. market, for example, you have the likes of USPS or you have the UPS, and those are, large-scale logistics providers that can take care of everything from the ticket from the warehouse or the distributor location or the hub, and they can deliver it to the last mile. Okay. In our market, it's a bit more fragmented. Okay. So we also had to spend some time build a logistics framework and a platform, then integrated multiple logistics partners. So that our own market is a little bit related more to Latin America. So Mercado Libre is probably closer to our own model because they also had to start in an environment where you have a very fragmented logistics market. So every market is unique, but the fundamental things are, at the end of the day, people want value, right? People, when you buy something, whether you're buying it online or you're buying it offline, you want value. You want convenience. Why do people shop online? They want price, they want convenience, they want, they want assortment. They want the fact that if I want to buy a little black dress that I search, I can find 20 or 100 different options of those. So for as long as we are able to do that in our own market, right, and we continue to see that trajectory year on year, we will also get to where they've been. So it's just a matter of time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. And what government regulations do you think we could see that would help advance online marketing across Nigeria that maybe doesn't exist yet?
There are a couple of things that I would suggest that I see has happened in other markets have been quite helpful, and not just for e-commerce, so that I don't look at it just from the hat of e-commerce, but also been very helpful in catalyzing growth in the environment. But if I start with the e-commerce, for example, for a long time, one of the things I think could be helpful in some of those markets is, especially in our own environment where government wants to move, fundamentally I think, also wants to move a lot of transactions to platforms or environments where they are traceable, visible, and therefore can be an opportunity for tax. So taxation, government needs the taxation. One of the ways to do that is actually to offer incentives to move transactions online. And one thing some markets have done is that you actually don't charge VAT. Counterintuitively, they don't charge VAT on online transactions, right? So that way you actually create a structural price competitiveness for online transactions, and you move more of those transactions online. Now, after you've created that value, then you begin to extract the value, because those companies will grow, they would be stable, and then, of course, you're going to get your corporate income tax from more profitable enterprises and so on. That's one. Another one could also be this training thing, which is very important. Making sure that there are investments in training. Those core skills are so important. If I can identify what are the core skills that are fundamental for anyone who comes into digital space, is those core skills. It's problem-solving skills, it's critical reasoning skills, it's math skills, computer programming, it's literary skills, and so on. So any government initiative that is designed to provide that is extremely useful. And one thing I also saw in some other markets, interestingly, was where companies like the Nigerian Security Printing and Minting Company, an example, because it's into security printing and minting, I've seen their counterparties in other countries actually be the ones to authenticate documentation, right? They authenticate document, they call it securitization of documents. What does that help to do? You know the number of travel that people do in this country just to go and cite a document before a transaction can occur. But if you have a digital intermediary, a digital interface securitized by an authority like that, that also creates opportunities for transactions to happen in faster time and in real time. Right? And a lot of the inefficiencies that happens, 2 days, 5 days, you're trying to authenticate documents because someone has to cite it here and so on. So these are some examples. I mean, I could go on, but it's just some examples that I would put on the table. Yeah.
Those are useful examples, and I hope FIRS heeds your words, because they're planning to collect VAT come January 2020 on online transactions. I wanted to talk to you about that imported tradition called Black Friday, which Jumia also has. Now, there are other markets outside of the US who imported it as well, but are thinking of scrapping it, specifically those in Europe. What are your thoughts? Has it benefited you in any way in Nigeria? Is it here to stay? And can you give us a scoop as to the date? Because we know it's sometime in November, but if you want to share, we're all ears.
I could start with the dates in November. So this time we're having 5 Black Fridays, because we found that 1 Black Friday is actually not sufficient. Yeah, because some people are out of town, some people are out of Lagos, so they get to hear much later. So now we have 5 Black Fridays starting on, I think, November 8th. Okay, so starting from November 8th, every Friday is a Black Friday in 2019. Yeah, but honestly, it could be Black Friday, it could be Black Monday, it could be anything. People just want the animation of an event that helps them to, source. So people delay certain purchases they want to make because they want to see if they can get the best deals, especially very important and high value items they want to buy, like phones or electronics or different things that people want to buy. They just want to have an event, right? So it's more a commercial consumer animation event than anything else. So even if we had to do away with Black Friday, we will have to replace it with something, right? But it's been quite successful. We see also that year on year, even offline retail has also adopted Black Friday. So it's good, right? And for us also, it's validation that there is hunger and there's opportunity in this market. If you develop the right kinds of campaigns that appeal to consumers, they respond. They're happy to participate in it, and we want to do more of those.
Absolutely. I mean, 5 Black Fridays in November is quite a lot, which means that Jumia must also see a lot of benefit in doing Black Fridays as well. So what would you say are the key benefits for the company when it comes to Black Friday sales?
The benefits for Black Friday sales are really about, like I mentioned, is consumer animation. So it's one time when your consumers look forward to you've sourced the best deals for them. They want to come on site. The traffic that period is actually extremely high because people want to come and browse. They want to consume content on the site and so on. It can be challenging if you don't plan. But of course, now we've seen that we plan way months ahead. I mean, you can plan 5 Black Fridays in 1 month. You have to do like months and months ahead of time, yeah. So that's the benefit. The benefit for us is actually is awareness, is consumer adoption. That's really what we use it for more than anything else.
Now I want to talk about your vendors.
Yeah.
In the retail sector, there's been huge problems with access to credit, access to finance. What has been done for the retail sector by the government, and is it satisfactory? What should be happening there?
For me, honestly, I would focus on is what we are doing within our own ecosystem. So we have sellers on our ecosystem, and we have sellers who we typically have what we call a seller score. So seller score is looking at many things. Is looking at the quality of the products that the seller has been selling on the platform. It's looking at their shipping speed, for example. It's looking at the price. And consumers reward sellers who have very high seller scores with more frequency of orders and all that. So we've also seen that as something that it's a proxy for credit scoring, right? And we've been able to provide, we call it Jumia lending. So started Jumia lending. We've been able to, sort of bring sellers who have good seller scores together with microfinance organizations to say, okay, these guys, they work on our platform and we think you should be able to lend to them. And we've seen a lot of sellers on our platform who've grown their businesses based on that. So these are things we're doing on our platform.
Do you offer a guarantee or just the introduction?
No, we've offered the introduction. We offer the introduction. But because there's a transaction history that the lender can see, then that's very valuable information that they can use to determine who to lend to.
That's really important.
Yeah, very. Yeah. And how would you rate Jumia's advancement, let's say, in customer service over the years? Would you say you're happy with the level of customer service from your company, or is there a lot of room for improvement that you see?
Oh, we are always ambitious to improve. So there's never any time that you can ask me that question, I'm going to say that it's perfect. Never, because it's always, I mean, I can tell you that where we were, like I mentioned when we started, of course, we were still very rudimentary to where we are now. It's a far cry from where we were then. We've invested a lot in our systems, we've invested a lot in people, processes to make things, even in policies. For today, for example, depending on the customer, if it's a customer who, from their profile, is a customer. So, for example, you're a customer you've ordered like 5 times before. Each time they came to deliver your products, you're there, you're available, or you made arrangement for that to be available for someone to pick them up. If for any reason you say, oh, I don't want this item anymore, we could actually refund you even before we pick up the item, just based on your profile.
So that leads me to my next question. You know, you mentioned Jumia Pay. Oh, we're running out of time. I wanted to talk about payments on delivery or what have you. We've run out of time.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Welcome. Thank you.